Hi, this is Nathan Crane, founder of the Panacea Community, and I want to thank everyone for joining us for the second annual Self-Reliance Summit. This summit's dedicated to bringing you real-world practical advice and inspiration for living more self-reliant, interconnected, and sustainable. It's about building skills for the new world and helping each of us realize how to live in more harmony with this beautiful place we call home. And today I'm super excited to introduce our speaker, Sacha Stone. Sacha's the founder of Humanitad. He's also the founder of the NewEarth Project and the International Tribunal for Natural Justice. While he's outspoken against the centralization of power and of multilateral institutional manipulation, Sacha did produce the MDG Awards ceremony on the floor of the General Assembly at the United Nations in 2009. And in order to engage with the mechanics of centralized power, it was at this event where Archbishop Desmond Tutu propounded the word Ubuntu, which is fast becoming a major pattern for international socio-ecological reform. Sacha has a plethora of global experience, and we're honored to have him with us today. Sacha, thanks so much for joining us on the Self-Reliance Summit.
Nathan, a great pleasure to be with you, my friend, and may I say it's just a delightful hat you're wearing.
Hey, thank you, brother. It's one of my favorites. I'm really getting into the Southwest spirit here now. I've been in Santa Fe for about a year and a half, so it's taken its hold on me. So we're going to dive right in. I know you have so much to share. You're involved in so many global projects that are really laying ground for the foundation of a sustainable future, and I just want to honor you and recognize you for the work you're doing, as well as dive into some of these important questions where we can really empower people who are tuning in with us to build these new skills for this new world we're all a part of.
Beautiful. As I said, Nathan, you'll have to forgive me if I'm slightly lackadaisical in my responses. I just got off a plane from Asia and slightly lagged. Like I said, it's 6 o'clock tomorrow morning for me right now. But nonetheless, I'm summoning all my resources here and now.
Awesome. Well, happy to have you. So we're going to dive right in. And today we're talking about claiming your true voice and your sovereign self-expression. Sacha, what do you mean when you say sovereign self-expression?
Well, what I mean is that it is anything and everything that relates to how you engage your pattern of perfection in the world. And it's not connected to how you repeat ad infinitum that which was taught to you in school, or that which is taught to you by your cultural predisposition or your religious predisposition. So sovereign expression in this context is something which really stems from within you once you stand up in this world, preferably as a young person, and engage a mirror and see yourself for the first time, and see your own role in this world. Not one that is spoon-fed to you, but one that really is where your bliss lies and where your passion lies. So once you've established what that is, to be able to engage and wrestle with the world in order to make manifest your will in that sense, that is sovereign expression, not repeating ad nauseum the law of first report, meaning to say things that were taught to you by your school, your university, your culture, your religion, your government. We need to step away from systems and from repeating stuff that's been programmed into us, and we need to start to engage our true creative expansion. That is, by definition, our sovereign expression.
So as Don Miguel Ruiz writes in his books and his work about domestication of the human, or as we talk about, conditioning, mental, social, emotional conditioning, since we're children, basically what you're referring to is, the way that we're brought up and the things that we're taught and the things that we believe to be true simply because a peer or a teacher or a parent or grandparent or a friend told us that it was true, like in the case, you can never sing, or, you have a terrible voice, or, you'll never be a successful XYZ, or the world is the way it is because that's how it is. You just have to, fit in with everything. Those kinds of conditioning is what you're referring to. And I think The challenge for most people when we talk about this is recognizing those patterns within ourselves, right? So what, I mean, how do people begin to even recognize when those patterns exist within themselves?
Well, I don't know. I mean, in myself, it was a sense of contempt really emerging at a given point when you recognize that the law is not there to serve you as a human being. The law is there to serve a government or to serve a municipality or to serve systems, to serve banks, to serve the flow of money. It's especially statutory law, which is not law in and of itself. I mean, most people, most of the time, are having their lives completely butchered into shape and into submission by ordinances and statutes and bylaws. These are not laws at all. They are notions dreamt up by bureaucrats and technocrats and enforced down the barrel of a gun. But actually, they've got no standing in law or in natural justice. And so they've got no business impinging on our lives and in shaping our lives. And yet, we've steadily permissioned that kind of tiptoe tyranny to step into our lives, overtake our lives, and now completely subsume our sovereign expression beneath the weight of that statutory bullshit. And this is the stuff that humans have to step away from, re-engage with the organic, the living, as opposed to the fictitious and the unreal. Governments are fictions. Multinational corporations, all corporations are fictions. Systems are fictions. They're bad ideas, dreamt up effectively by men predicated on notions of scarcity and fear reflexivity. So we've permissioned governments and militias, militaries, police, constabularies, systems, institutions to take over our lives and govern every aspect of our lives. And yet they are all dead fictions. What does that tell us about what we're permissioning to govern us? We're allowing dead fictions to govern our organic lives. Not many people can understand this distinction because their lives have been so indentured into the fictions that they can scarcely see the wood for the trees.
Well, and I think that brings us to the important point that, you know, innately or conditioned within us, however we want to look at it, we want to believe that our government has our best interests. We want to believe that the police force or the this force or the that force is really, they're designed to take care of our best interests, to support us, to protect us, to serve us. And as you and I and many people watching know, that's not always the case. Now, I can't speak for every government and every, political system on the planet because I don't know every single one, but I do know, especially here in the United States where I am, as many people know, the government really is not here to look out for our best interest. And if they were, it would be a non-profit organization. It would be an organization that is designed not for profit. There would be limitations on the amount of money that politicians could make, and they would be in the position of power to try and create systems to support humanity from a place of love and caring versus how to lobby for the most money to get some corporation to write my bill for me so I can buy another yacht kind of scenario, right?
Well, yes, you just said it. Profiteering off the enslavement of Homo sapiens is what governments do. And in point of fact, governments were set up precisely in order to do that. This is part of the shock doctrine that people are going to have to wake up to. The fact that this very arcane Jesuitical tradition that underpins governments was always about police enforcing statutory and ordinances set up to protect by technocrats and bureaucrats to protect and serve banks and bankers. So governments are corporations, privately owned corporations masquerading as governments. Therefore, they all stand in treason and fraud. And under the highest expression of any law, in point of fact, you can prove out palpably that governments are fictions that are standing in treason and in fraud against the people that they are mandated to serve. But the part of the complexity is law. because law has become the language of obfuscation, the language of smoke and mirrors. It's behind law and the vernacular of law that governments and the invisible hand that drives governments hide behind that law. And human beings, for instance, are governed by some 10 million laws. And yet when you're arrested on some trumped up charge, you're told that not knowing the law or the statute is no excuse. Well, how can that in and of itself be jurisprudence? How can that speak to justice? It doesn't and can't. So therefore, again, a primary sovereignty is being defiled and degraded by government. And to beat an old donkey to death here, most people should wake up to the fact that government in itself means mind control. If you look at the word govern and ment, it's the control of the mind. And so that's the technology that has steadily been implemented into our civilizational matrix in order to harvest and monetize human beings' time and energy. And that's what you've got today. You've got 7 billion people, those that are not still throwing spears in the jungles or in the desert hinterlands, are living invariably in city landscapes, condensed, highly toxic, highly inorganic urban landscapes where they're being polluted and genocided to death by vaccination programs, by chemtrails raining bariums and phosphates upon them, by water supply that's completely contaminated with fluoride and other hormones and toxic chemicals, soil and seed that are being completely depleted, again, systemically by multinationals. Those same multinationals which own the lobbying that controls and drives government policy. So it's a vicious and vile feedback scenario which we permissioned into play. And it takes a madman to go along with that. And yet, what do we see in the United States today? We see bread and Christians being fed to the lions. We see people buying into the dialectic of this Republican Democratic jamboree bullshit, and who's going to win the race. That's where the insanity prevails, in the collective status quo of good people who themselves are having a tea party in a prison cell and apparently getting off on it. That's tragic.
Yeah, and you said something a second ago that I think is really vital, is that we give permission, and I think a lot of people don't realize that we have a choice in the matter. I think a lot of people feel like, well, this is what we got, so we just deal with it. We go to work, we live our lives, we make enough money to get by, and hopefully try somewhere along the path be happy. But what I think we've lost along the way is that sovereign instinct within ourselves to want to be free and to actually know that we have the choice and the capacity to be free. But the question is, how do we get there? And what does sovereignty really mean? So, maybe those are two questions that you can address. Sovereignty, what is it? And how does it apply to us? And two, how do we get there?
Sovereignty is when we uncouple, in the sense that you're speaking to right now. Sovereignty is what we discover when we uncouple ourselves from the invisible hand, from the control of the state or the crown. And again, when one goes into it, you learn that it's a science. I refer to it as a Babylonian priesthood that drives the agenda. And I refer to it as a Babylonian priesthood because that's exactly what it is. If you understand Canaanite ritualism, if you understand the language of Gog and Magog and where our contemporaneous civilization issues from, a very long pathology of covert manipulation and control of the human family, and an exploitation of the fundamental human condition, which is goodness, generic goodness. And this is the thing that's being exploited to the max, is precisely that quanta of the human heart, which is a good quality. It's our highest value. The capacity to love and be loved, and the capacity to be so believing and trusting. And that's what's being exploited consistently by this invisible hand. And it brings us to your question of sovereignty. What defines sovereignty? In my view, what defines us as sovereigns, once we uncouple and step away from the invisible contracts. So I repeat that, when you step back and uncouple from the invisible contract, and in the temporal sense, that means the birth certificate. It means the business of registering your children to the state or the crown at birth and handing them over to Cronus, the titan that devours its own young. This is all locked into the etymology, the dream spelling, the spell binding of the human farce and tragedy. It's all encoded in the words. But the fact of the matter is that we are offering ourselves and our children up to the crown, to the state, to Cronus at birth. And that birth certification is a contract, it's a de facto contract that we enter into willingly. And so we handed, when we received that notice through the post saying, fill in the form, you've just purchased a new car, but you have to register it. Well, read the small print. You're handing your car over to the state when you sign that piece of paper. You're now becoming the registered keeper, but you're not the owner. The state is now the owner, which is what gives the state patrol or the police the right to stop you and bully you and stick a gun in your face or beat you up. You effectively handed that control to them through the contract of registering your vehicle to them and buying into their statutory bullshit. What is their bullshit? They're putting out statutes and ordinances saying you are required to do A, B, and C under law. No, you are not. You are led to believe that you're required to do A, B, and C, and you're told that it's by law, but that's not law. That's by statute. It's a very different thing. Natural law is something very different, and it's something which is innate and intrinsic in all good humans, which is simply this: to go about the surface of the earth unmolested and unmolesting of one another, provided we do cause no harm, loss, or injury to another living soul. Well, that's it. That's your law. That's natural justice. And so long as every man, woman, and child is conforming to that very simple metric, then everyone is peaceable. Everyone is free to express and to unfold and to become whatever they choose, whatever they wish. That's as it should be. That invites a reality which is filled with abundance and prosperity and vibrancy, as opposed to the grisly reality that most of us live with most of the time, being punched in the face every morning when we wake up and walk out the door, huddled against the cold winds to get to a godless job in order to work our guts out to make money sufficient to simply survive, to pay bills, utility bills, heating, lighting, transport, scarcely enough to pay for a donut at the end of it, let alone to take a holiday in the Pacific Islands. And most people are trapped in that god-awful harvest wheel. No means of escaping it. And it's small surprise that there's such a rise in crime, given that kind of rat-like existence. But that's what we're permissioning, and that's the fundamental point, is that we are the ones who are abnegating or surrendering our sovereignty. And if it really comes down to it, it's not being done to us. We're allowing it to be done to us. That's what I mean by looking in the mirror and standing on your feet. Because it's only when we get that I am countenancing, I am permissioning all that happens to me, that's the day I stand up and say no more. In the first instance, the most sane advisement that anyone could give or be given in 2016 is stop paying taxes. It's really that simple, because it is your taxes that is paying the creature that is killing you, that is harvesting you. And yet it's a terribly contentious thing to say, apparently, let alone to believe. And yet that's really where it's at. So when people take a foundational, responsible view of their own lives and that of the welfare of their families, the very first thing they should do is to stop paying in to the creature that is destroying their livelihoods, their civil liberties, and indeed their lives, when you consider, again, that our food and water and air are being systemically poisoned by our governments, who are owned and controlled by corporations. That's the feedback loop we've allowed. Let's stop it. How do we stop it? We stop fueling it with taxes in the first instance. The only people who should be paying taxes are merchants, corporations. That's absolutely fair and just. That was always the way. Let businessmen and merchants in the market square pay a levy, pay a toll to have the roads paved and the lamps lit at sunset. But living men and women of the soil should never pay a dime. Personal tax and income tax is a Jesuitical ploy. It's a technology of molestation of the human family, and it's a crying shame that that was ever permitted.
So I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, and it reminded me of a saying that Buddha was actually attributed to saying, and it goes something like, he was talking to a disciple or somebody who was asking him a question, and his response was, do anything you want in life, do whatever you want, enjoy life, do everything, just don't hurt yourself or don't hurt other people. Now that's a profound philosophy, and it's something you basically touched on, that if we were all living by that kind of philosophy, that yes, we're here to experience life and have a great time, and let's do what we want to do, but let's don't destroy each other, let's don't destroy ourselves, let's don't destroy the planet, we would live in a very, very different kind of world, a very peaceful, joyful world. Yet at the same time, we have people that rape and steal and murder and do all of these terrible things. And there's a lot of causes for that, of course. And so obviously that's why governments come in and feel justified to create all these laws to protect the people against people doing, what we obviously would call bad things to other people. Now, my question is, in regards to, if you stop paying your taxes, if you don't register your vehicle, if you do these things that you're suggesting, then how are you going to go about your life in a country where they penalize you and punish you because of these laws they've created, without being locked up and thrown away and all of your assets taken and that sort of thing?
I understand the question. If you understand, well, the first thing to do would be to wise up and get fresh with law and start to understand the basis of real law and natural justice. When the International Tribunal that we've set up, and which is running great guns, is out there right now with its own Chief Justice and court officers and trustees and law commission, and is beginning to engage with the metric of law, working even in and through governments in some cases. So you'll hear more about the International Tribunal for Natural Justice as the months and years roll on. But it's a court that we established in June of last year in Westminster in the United Kingdom under multilateral observance. It's real. It's a court. It's conducting court. We set it up. It's our court of record. And it's got a very eminent constitutional Chief Justice and a great many very brilliant law lords from around the world participating in the successes of that court. We have very major political figures also supporting and endorsing the International Tribunal. We've even got governments knocking on our door asking some elements within government seeking to find remedy within our tribunal. So, for instance, when you step up and learn the metric of the game you can invariably play it better than the man who hasn't. So it's not difficult to beat a system which is standing in fraud and treason if you understand its language. So the system is using the language of law. Then learn to use the language of law even better. Get to grips with the true language of law. Come back at that creature with a stick and beat it to death. That's what we're doing effectively. And that's what I would suggest to anyone. Some of the greatest law minds on earth are people who've been wrongly incarcerated. And they've sat in a prison cell for 15 years and studied Black's dictionary and come out really understanding natural justice and the science of forgiveness as well, incidentally. But my point is that we can take the position, Nathan, that the system is oppressing us and that we have to conform, otherwise it'll bang us up in a cell. And you're absolutely right. The system, given half a chance, will do that, but not if you know how to counter the system effectively. And that takes intelligence, it takes aptitude, it also takes community standing up to that creature. And I would suggest that that's the most powerful thing that we've got going. Those of us who are recognizing that the system has gone rogue, that governments have gone rogue, that banks have gone rogue, multinational corporations have gone rogue. We have community and we have social media. And that's a tool which has never been available to community before. And that right now is probably the most powerful means by which we can enforce change. But you can actually press charges against a policeman who's pressed charges against you. You can go and serve papers against a rogue official in a government or a municipality who has defiled law against you. You just have to get to grips with the language of law and do it. And pretty much anyone can do that. That's the truth. You can also create your own tribunal and citizens' hearings. And I would suggest that people start to do that. Bottom line, government is mafia. That's all that governments are. They are well coordinated crime syndicates. The ones that are fictions, corporate fictions, owned ultimately by the central banks and central bankers, are criminal syndicates, crime syndicates, and they're enforcing their wealth and their own prosperity through the harvest of innocence and through racketeering, protectionism. That's all that forced income tax is protectionism and racketeering. It's Al Capone gone very corporate. And how and why people can't see it, that to me is a mystery. But I'm assuming that's why so much cheap drugs and alcohol are foisted onto the streets in order to keep people indentured and intoxicated against reality.
Right. And you mentioned communities as the most powerful way to really, take back our autonomy or our sovereignty. And I agree with that. I think, small, very focused, localized communities dedicated to, sustainability, living in harmony, health and healing, and creating an environment that they feel proud to hand down to their children and grandchildren, and being able to create different types of modes of exchange and trade to, keep ourselves abundantly living without this fear mentality of how do I survive, but how to truly thrive. I think communities are the absolute solution for that. And you, through the NewEarth projects and the communities you're developing, you've created I don't know if you want to call it a template or a blueprint, but a format for people to get involved in community. Can you talk about that for a bit?
Sure. Well, it's a metric, and we're not so much as developing the communities as we are availing ourselves to participate in the development of communities. I mean, the NewEarth communities are all about self-determining men and women in different parts of the world, engaging that metric variously under their own cognizance and using their own resources and making that manifest. And we're launching a few flagships roundabout now, a little bit later than I would have anticipated in the early days when we launched the project 2.5 years ago. I was a lot more gung-ho at that time, but we've learned a great deal, and we're seeing a lot of a shift going on. And now we're beginning to see the seeding take place. It's a complex business. You're absolutely right to talk about self-organizing communities being the backbone. That's really what it is about, selecting from amongst your own number people who are resonant with the same values that you have, getting yourself a master builder, a plumber, electrician, a teacher, a candlestick maker, and all facing each other and going, hey, let's self-determine, let's self-organize a community. I can build, I can plumb, I can wire up the place, and just crack on and do it, and not pay too much attention, again, to the statutory nonsense and the prohibitions that are put out there by government. Where a government does try to prohibit your natural born right to self-organize and create a prosperous community, then you have to smarten up. And you have to pick up sticks. You need to go and you need to challenge that official or that government. And when I say pick up a stick, I mean the stick of law, the stick of pure truth, of natural justice, of righteousness. And gather as many people as you can to that cause. The Bundy Ranch in the United States was a classic example. We all know that there are successes and failures when you stand up to the government. David Koresh, I think it was the Seventh-day Adventists back in the day, stood up to the federal government, not because he was a cult leader. They ended up being blown to smithereens by the FBI, as I recall, in an inferno of flames, men, women, and children. And the mainstream media falsely reported at the time that David Koresh was a cult leader and a very dark man. No, he wasn't. He just discovered some things that were going on in a local airfield connected to racketeering and drug running by the federal government, and he was about to expose that. So he was demonized very quickly, and they came at him, and the press, of course, did what they always do, and would just followed the official line given to them by some corrupt FBI officials or central government agents. And the rest is history, but very false history, complete deception. The same thing with Timothy McVeigh, I think was the Oklahoma bombings. I mean, there's a rich pathology of high crimes by the federal government or rouge or shadow elements within the federal government trying to cover up its own tracks all the way up to 9/11 and beyond. And that's going on eyes wide shut in plain sight. But people are kept busy with trivia and mediocrity when the most grisly and Saturnian crimes are being conducted under our noses by our governments. Principally, I'm talking, of course, about drug running and gun running. And that's not even going into sex slavery and child trafficking and a lot of far more grisly enterprises being conducted in the basement. But again, this is not your average parliamentarian or government official doesn't know the first thing about these enterprises. And yet they are being conducted by the governments proper without the body politic ever knowing it. So this is part of the grisly dialectic of how our Luciferian civilization, meaning to say false light worshipping civilization, is propped up on these kind of machinations. And most people will never even come close to the truth.
So let's talk about some resources and some ways that people can, research more about law, about becoming sovereign, about the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, about, forming communities and being involved in some of the NewEarth projects. Maybe share some of your websites and some of the things people can do who really want to go further on this path.
Well, it's out there. We've got a number of websites out there. And as you rightly said earlier, it's really offering blueprints and templates to people of the world. But Nathan, I know I'm rattling the cage a bit on this, but the reason why I speak to the negative aspects of what's going on in the basement of our culture is because until we address that stuff, my friend, I don't believe we're ever going to be able to get it together to build the new earth fully. We simply have to address our civilizational shadow. And where we fail to do so, that really speaks volumes about our own absence of courage, absence of conviction, absence of spiritual integrity. We simply must actually peer into the basement and recognize those lower elements of our culture, of our collective's unconscious, bring them to the light. And then I dare say grace will be with us and the wind will be beneath our wings. At that point, it'll become very easy for us to seed the new earth and to anchor those patterns of perfection that each of us in our right mind wish to see flourish in this world. None of us want to see wars. None of us want to see disease.
Right.
None of us want to see scarcity and poverty prevailing on the streets and misery in the eyes of our brothers and sisters. We all of us want what's best for one another at the individual level and at the collective level. But we need to earn that. We need to earn that position. Right now, I would suggest that what people need to do is to really begin to engage the business of truth, saying and fact-finding, drilling down into the truth of what's behind our governments, what's behind our religious institutions, what's behind the civilizational wheel, what part we're playing in it by being and remaining unconscious, and by not having the courage to stand up within ourselves and lay claim to our spiritual sovereignty and our true integrity, and then move forward and brick by brick start to build that new world, that new life, the one that we want to live, the one that really brings the very best out in us and those that we love. That is all we should be concerned about, is manifesting beauty, art and consciousness in our lives.
Yeah, beautiful. And it just reminds me of, when something new is being started, there might be a few people or a few communities following that path. Let's say an autonomous path, for example, of self-reliance, sustainability, art and beauty and consciousness. And majority of people hear about it or see it or whatever and just think of how crazy they are. And then all of a sudden another community is formed, and another and another and another. And then all of a sudden people start paying attention and go, this is still a little crazy, but more people are getting on board. I wonder what that's about. And then another and another and another. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, we wake up collectively, consciously, and go, oh, that's what I've been missing all along. That's where my fulfilling life has been lost. I've been following this dream of materialism, which is completely fleeting and unfulfilling. And look at how happy these people are living in sovereignty and joy and sustainability. I want to go check that out. I want to live that way. And then it becomes, globally acceptable.
Well, all the successful chapters in the human and civilizational stories have always been seeded by artists. It's always the visionaries first, the madmen who go standing in the desert barking at the sky, and the next along comes the poet who professes some beautiful words to the stars in that nighttime sky, and then along comes the artist and the cartographer who starts to inscribe things upon the land and ideas upon paper, and then come the builders who build that vision into manifestation, and then along come the fucking Jesuits and exploit the game and take it into banking, into usury and into commerce, and then the entropy then kicks in and the whole thing falls back into destructivity. So that's broadly speaking the wheel, but it's always begun by madmen followed by artists. Let us
Well,
not forget that.
well, and it's a good point, and it's also, I think it's time that we cut out the middlemen. I mean, I call, capitalism, money, the green notes or whatever color your notes are. I mean, that's the middleman. Why do we have to have a middleman to handle our transactions, our trade, right? We're trading time and energy for money just to get food. Why would we do that when we could put an hour in a day and grow our own food, because we've been conditioned to believe that that's what gives us fulfillment. But we're learning differently, and the work you've been doing is incredible. I want to share some websites with folks so they can get in touch with you and get involved in some of the projects you're doing. Humanitad.org, like human, humanitad.org, humanitad.org. And then there's links there for the International Tribunal for Natural Justice and the NewEarth Projects and so forth. Check it out. Get involved. This is going to take, as they say, it takes a village. Well, it's going to take many villages to turn this, ship around. And I have a lot of hope. I think we're headed. I think we have the possibility to head in a really good direction. As you may know, and some people viewing, we have an intention to build a sustainable community and school here in Santa Fe that can be a beacon of hope for people all over the world, that is autonomous and self-sustained and completely living in harmony with nature and free for school and community and people to come and partake in it, and not designed to be a money-making machine, but to be an example of, the future, the new world. And that's called Eucadia, Y-O-U-Cadia. And also we have a 4-day transformational festival happening in Santa Fe in September called Unify Fest, which is really dedicated to unifying humanity of all walks of life, tribes, religions, creeds, sexes, colors, through conscious transformational workshops, new life skills, learning basket weaving out of the old style candle making, building these skills for the new world, permaculture, medicine making, foraging, these skills we need to really not only survive but to thrive and live in harmony with the planet, as well as great conscious music and yoga and tai chi and qigong, personal development skills. So I encourage everyone watching who's interested in being in that kind of environment. It's a sober, conscious, uplifting, fun, transformational environment. It's called Unify Fest, and it's unifyfest.com. And the last website I want to share is for those who may have missed some of the other interviews during this free broadcast period, you can own the entire set. And you can check that out at the selfreliancesummit.com/upgrade. There's probably a link on this webpage here. And we'll have links to all of Sacha's websites as well, probably below this video. So take a look at that. Sacha, last words of hope, encouragement, empowerment you want to leave people with today?
Well, you've just said it all in your lovely closure. You were just describing really the beautiful festival environment. And I was with some of my crew last week in Bali at our base there, and we were talking about the 7-day NewEarth Festival that we're planning for April next year. The first one is taking place in Bali. And we describe a very similar rollout as you've just described for this Unify Fest.
Unify Fest, yeah. Beautiful.
Unify Fest.
Nice.
And it seems to me that all of these beautiful festivals are really corresponding to the same heart frequency and to the same beautiful mental tapestry as well, where we're really trying to inspire ourselves and one another into a new kind of psycho-spiritual, cultural genesis, a new becoming. And the question remains, when you go to a festival and you have this completely inspired time, and you invariably wake up in the first morning at a festival and go, well, isn't this what life is supposed to be like? I mean, I don't want to be anywhere else.
Right.
Absent the drugs and the alcohol and hangovers and the rest of it, that sense of perpetual enchantment and perpetual discovery and perpetual unfoldment and expansivity and creative abundance. That's really the signature of the human condition, is to be that creature, enchanted, inspired, creatively expansive, and fully conscious of riding that beautiful, what do we call, bliss peak wave. Well, I would suggest that people need to simply claim that as the status quo and manifest lives that are a living exposition of creativity and spiritual unfoldment. It's ours to have, provided we put away the broken lives and the broken dreams and the broken civilizational wheel. Just dispense with it. Let it go. Step away. Stop paying into it. And let's just manifest that perpetual living exposition of creativity. That's how our lives should be on a daily basis. And I think you and I fully concur on that level.
Absolutely. Yeah. You said it the best I think I've ever heard. Embody that which we most desire, and we will create, an amazing planet. I believe it's possible, but like you said, we got to be aware of what's happening and what's going on. We have to make decisions to stand up against it, and we have to take action to create the new world environment and experience that we want on the planet, and we can do it. Everybody has the power and the ability to take the choice to take that action. So it's these festivals, it's the organizations that Sacha's a part of, the NewEarth Project, Panacea Community, Unify Fest, all of these things, and many, many others that are sprouting up all over the world that you can get involved in to make a difference, and then start your own community or join a community. And look, it's true. We'll change the world, no doubt. Everybody watching. So thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. I truly appreciate it. Sacha, thanks so much for sharing with us. I could talk to you for hours, man. I know you have so much to share, but thank you. This was really, really, really insightful. So appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you, Nathan. It was a delight.
Awesome. And thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time on the Self-Reliance Summit. Take care.